the theme for today is making the distinction between data, information, and wisdom. And I did this mainly because the notion of wisdom and the ultimate purpose of meditation and all the contemplative traditions is generating wisdom. And we don't really think of that much with mindfulness meditation because of the mountain of advertising that's marketing it like, it's Tylenol. We get upset about something and we go sit for a few minutes and we feel better and that's just great, or we feel frazzled at the end of the week and we go to the yoga center, we meditate for a few minutes and we feel great and go about our lives, and there's really not much progress. We got to go back and meditate some more if we want to feel better. And so what I've always been interested in is, not always been interested in, but at one point I switched from how do I feel better right now to how can I make my life better in general. I don't have to keep going back and going for a walk in the woods in order to feel better, or whatever it is. I would like to raise my general baseline of feeling good or okay. With that intention, my practice really changed, and I began to learn more about the simple meditation that we're going to do today, mindfulness meditation, where we just relax, and when a thought or a feeling comes up, we recognize it as a thought or feeling, and we let it go, and we come back to the present moment. I started taking a look at some of the traditions and seeing what they had to say about that, and why is this meditation in all the major religious traditions of the world. How has it come to be such a phenomenon in our world culture today? And what I find is that there's the United States and pretty much most of the world is a consumer-based economy. And as a consumer-based economy, certain things are necessary in order to be able to sell products or services. And one of them is it has to be commoditized, meaning it has to have a distinct, marketable construct to promote. And with all the research, neuroresearch, and the neuroscience on mindfulness, there is a mountain of good things that happen. There's a general sense of well-being, we get better at making decisions, and so on and so forth. I'm sure you're all familiar with those. But what gets promoted is something that whoever's marketing it think that if they say this, then everybody's going to want to come and buy their product or service or workshop or whatever. And that's basically the feeling better, relaxing, general sense of well-being, etc. And all that's wonderful, I'm not knocking that. But I really had the urge to go further, and what brought these particular modules, this program together, was people also wanting to go further. People have taken the 8-week MBSR program and meditate, and then kind of at some point kind of feel like, what's next? I've kind of, So in talking about the difference between data, knowledge, and wisdom, I guess I also felt impelled by this because the advent of artificial intelligence is really demanding that we make, in my view, demanding for us to be very clear about what's going on and what the difference is between these two orders of information, so that we don't mistake one for the other. In other words, if we're depending on AI for information, that's great. If we're depending on it for wisdom, not so good, in my opinion. And the third thing is that the state of the politics of the world is of such a degree that it's engendering widespread, fundamental anxiety and nervousness and anxiousness in the general population. 3/4 of the people apparently, according to the American Psychological Association today, are very concerned. Therefore, I see it's really important to be able to make the distinctions between these three orders of information. Also, data is just information that really doesn't have any necessary purpose, or it's not organized in a particular way. It's gathering a bunch of information, like some scientists going out and measuring how many different species of plants are in a square yard. You get that, and then you get that as data. That's raw data. Then you can turn it into information. Then you codify them as to whether they're useful plants or poisonous plants or medicinal plants or food plants, or useful in some other way. So then that becomes a sort of another order of information, and that's where the next step is with wisdom. And wisdom is, okay, now that we know, let's say that 25% of the plants are medicinal plants, then we can begin to think differently about that plot of land. Then we move from being a botanist, which is somebody who knows a lot of the information about the plant looks like and the history of it and the story of that particular plant. But then that's not very helpful if somebody next to him has a problem, and even though the plant that may help them is right in front of them, they don't know what to do. But if they're with an herbalist, or yerbero, or whatever you want to call it, then the person who has the wisdom to know how to work with plants will have something to give them and help them feel better. The task of mindfulness meditation is initially just to help us to settle down and manage our nervous system, as we often talk about. And when a thought rises up, what we're confronted with is just sort of the raw data. Oh, I did this, or I did that, or they did this, or they did that, or I'm upset about this. And when we recognize it as such and let it go, we sort of remove our vote for data thinking or information thinking. And what happens when we do that, when we let that go, there's this space between thoughts that Viktor Frankl talks about and every contemplative tradition talks about. That's our natural mind, and natural mind is where wisdom comes from. And it's really kind of mysterious how it happens. There's some neuroscience on it, and they're trying to identify the different parts of the brain that are involved. But it seems to be, it's a little early on this, but it seems to be that very different parts of the brain are activated when in the process of generating or listening to or dealing with wisdom. So it's a much more of it's a more complex response in the brain. And personally, I find it really fascinating, because on a number of occasions where I was really perplexed about something, I just stop and I just sit for a minute. And then in a very short period of time, or right away, I get an idea or a thought or a hunch, and I go follow that, and things work out beautifully. So I'm still mystified by that process, but that's what I believe is the fruit of, well, one of the fruits of mindfulness meditation. And so what I thought we'd do today is take a look in our own minds and begin to think about the difference between data information and wisdom. We can consider a particular knotty problem, or a knot. I think of them as knots, or like, you know how kittens will play with yarn and they get it all tangled up and never get it untangled, you have to throw it away. Those kind of things that are in our psyche that need sorting, and kind of sit with it for a moment. Now this is on the verge of being vipassana practice, because vipassana practice is meant to do this. It's sort of self-inquiry, psychological inquiry, and we take a look at and work through things that trauma or grief or whatever it is, in order to get free of it, to resolve it. But in addition to that, what I'm hoping to do with today's practices is we begin to see and feel and recognize the difference between information and wisdom, because they're two completely different functions of the brain. And when we do that, the more clear we are on what actually is going on in our brain, then the more effective we can be in managing our awareness, our consciousness, and our thinking. And wisdom has been defined in a number of ways. And I'm going to leave that be for the moment, because that'll kind of take off in a whole other direction. But in a sense, wisdom is data is just like a flat view, one-dimensional. Information is like a two-dimensional view. And wisdom is like a fourth-dimensional view. We can see in and around things and understand the context and the unity of the individual things to the whole and vice versa. And it is characterized by creativity and insight. Einstein said that the rational mind that there's the intuitive mind and the rational mind, and the rational mind makes a terrible master and a good servant. And so he knew how to work with his intuitive mind and his rational mind. He needed the rational mind to work through all of his calculations and deal with the politics at hand and all that sort of stuff. Where his answers came from and his questions came from and his real work was in this unknown area that can't be, by definition, approached or worked through with the rational mind. What he ran across was irrational. I mean, relativity. Here on the planet, like, who cares? One train passes another. But it became a fundamental issue for him, and he could see it from many dimensions in order to be able to work with it. So he was, in my opinion, working primarily from wisdom. And he knew he had a sort of stepladder to get there. The path to get there is the rational mind. First he had to have data. Second he had to have the information and the work of other physicists and mathematicians and such on which to continue. But he had to make that leap into the unknown, so to speak, to do the work that he did. And so in a sense, when we're trying to work with our own lives, it's really important, this is a distinction in therapists, we have to make the clear distinction between story and processing. And when somebody's talking about their story, I did this then, and I graduated school then, and she broke my heart, and did this, and then I went and I started drinking, or it's just this sort of storyline. The storyline, I need, as a therapist, I need the storyline to kind of get a context and some continuity. Because when things happen, sometimes it's very important. It doesn't really explain anything, why that person did the things that they did, or why that person was in their lives, or what part of them was reacting in that particular way, or what it meant to them. So wisdom brings meaning. Depending on, whether I've had enough sleep or not, I'll wait 3 sessions for a client to get through the story. So I have enough information. But I tend to be, years ago I had a vocational assessment, and one of the things they said was being a therapist, but they didn't recommend that because I'm too impatient. Clients tend to take too long to change. But I'll give some 2 or 3 sessions to just unload and download what happened when, and once I have that framework, then we start asking questions. Okay, when such and such happened, how did that change your life? Then that gets into a whole other different direction. So most of the things that arise in our mind when we're meditating is just the story. And it's not all that meaningful anyway, really. I mean, how many times have we thought about our story? Over and over and over and over and over again, right? So when we're sitting in a mindfulness meditation and what comes up, we can assume most of the time that it doesn't have any particular relevance and is of no particular benefit to us, because most of the stuff that comes up is things that have come up 1,000 times before, and we sit on and ruminate them, and we think about this and we think about that. The situation is unchanged. So we say, I can't think with that, and we push it away, and then later on it comes back, it's the same thing all over again. So when we're letting a thought go, most of the time, it's not of much value anyway. And what we find, though, is, like in the contemplative traditions, the space between stimulus and response that Viktor Frankl talks about, and the meditative mindfulness space, that's where meaning happens, and insight happens, and wisdom happens. In the beginning with mindfulness meditation, it's a very fleeting, it's a half second, quarter second, 2 seconds, because more thoughts keep coming up, and we have to get rid of those and let those go. But after a while, that space begins to expand, not only during meditation, but it begins to expand for us in daily life. What that means is that if something difficult happens, we may have reacted out of anxiety and a sense of insecurity or resentment for the whatever part of the process, somebody was part of the process. But when we're in that space, that pause, we don't tend not to do that. We will pause and go, yow, that's a big change. And just kind of sit with it for a minute to kind of get all the data and let it settle in. And as it's settling in, we can ask questions like, okay, what's the best thing to do about that? And we start getting these intuitive responses from within us. And that's really what makes the difference. Figured we'd work on that today, and I'm going to ask at one point during the mindfulness meditation, first we're going to do the meditation, and then I'm going to ask people to bring up an issue that is unresolved, and as usual, on a scale of 1 to 10, something about a 3, maybe a 4 in difficulty or intensity or emotional charge, and sit with it and see what happens. And basically, this is just sitting and looking at it, just holding it in this equanimity between stimulus and response as best we can, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so finding a comfortable position where you don't have to move any muscles, and we'll get started. And just allowing ourselves to settle down. And settling into our body. This is a little pinpoint on the cosmic GPS screen of just right here, right now. Our body is our location in time and space. And so settling into this as best we can. And as thoughts rise up, simply recognizing them as a thought and releasing them and coming back to just sitting. Perhaps noticing the points of contact with the chair or the floor. And really for right now, just feeling what it's like to be sitting. And as things arise, recognizing and letting go. And as we let go, we may notice a sense of lightness or peacefulness. When our brain is not wound up with all the things of the day. As we let them go, our system, our body seems to settle down. And as we do, we continue to just settle in. And perhaps sometimes when a thought or feeling arises, we can just let it pass on through without it stopping at all. We can maintain our awareness right here, either with the body itself or with the breath. Sort of a place where we can, so to speak, park our awareness. And as we continue to settle in, feeling the body relax, and if we notice any tension, allowing that tension to just flow out. Because for right now, in the next few moments, there's nothing to do. Just to recognize, release, and return. And as we do, perhaps we can feel a desire to move toward stillness. And sitting in a field of stillness, so to speak. And allowing ourselves just to settle in to the state of being as best we can. And sometimes the brain is persistent and insistent, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong, and we can't change that, but we can change how we respond to that. Sort of like getting a text from work at 9 o'clock at night and deciding to let it go. It's that important, they'll leave you a voicemail. No thanks. Because right here, right now is like a special place, a chamber of silence and equanimity. At a place where, at least for the moment, is independent of the machinations of the world. And allowing us to continue to settle into this space as best we can. And people often experience that even though the mind may still be as busy, whatever arises is more quiet and easier to just let go of. And as we do this, our awareness of this space becomes a little more clear. So that when a thought or feeling arises, it's almost no effort at all to just send it on its way, or even just let it pass on through. And perhaps finding a sense of comfortability in this process and in this space. And now asking oneself or finding an incident or situation or experience that is bothersome. Again, level 3 or 4 on a scale of 1 to 10. So it's significant enough to bring up some emotion, but not so much as to be overwhelming. And bringing it clearly to mind, allowing it to arise in your awareness as fully as you can. And when we recall such things or bring our awareness to such things, they immediately want some sort of resolution. So before we get overly involved in that, seeing if you can simply be aware of the data, like it's a police report or something. There's just no emotional nuance to it at all. It's just what happened when, just the details of the facts. So that we get a clear idea of exactly what occurred as we remember it. And when we have that, next, being sensitive to or asking how that affected you. Bringing in your understanding of whatever the nature of the event was, whether it was deception or betrayal or something positive, whatever it was, and understanding those in their iconic value, their word definition values. Something was harmful or pleasant or unpleasant or deceitful, that sort of thing. Kind of getting the full story there. And then when that feels reasonably complete, and continuing to hold this in awareness, making inquiry as to what did I learn from this, or how can I learn from this, or in what ways did it change my life? What new understandings or perspectives did it bring into view, even though I may not have recognized it at the time? And allowing those meanings to arise. The import of the experience. And seeing what arises, and maybe there's thoughts or feelings you're familiar with, or maybe some new ones will arise. As you invite, the meaning of that experience comes to light. And welcoming it and being aware of it and absorbing that as best you can. And as the fullness of the experience, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, in its fullness, now bringing some compassion in for yourself. Having endured the experience, and now being able to reap some more meaning from it. All in the process of allowing and receiving. And the compassion arising can arise just as a feeling or a light, however it manifests for you. And allowing ourselves to absorb this encounter. and acknowledging that it is a part of us, and perhaps now we have a bit of a different view of it. And allowing this entire experience to settle in and soak in. Letting the body absorb it as a sponge absorbs water. Becoming fully a part of you. And with you. So that in a moment when the bell rings again, you can bring this with you as you go about your day. And come back to it at any time.